A Kabbalistic approach to our verse understands the meaning as follows. So this is, and Hashem planted, and God, Hashem Elohim, planted a garden in Eden to the east, or in the east, which is from early Genesis, I think Genesis 3. And this is how they understand it. So these words refer to a planting which had taken place a long time ago, hence the word, and here you see kedem there, which means extremely ancient, like the first, very ancient, since primeval times. Hence, like Adam kadmon, kadam. Had God planted the garden at the time described in the story, he would simply have had to give a directive such as he did during the reports of creation in chapter 1. The fact that the Torah does not do this, but describes God as having planted it, rather than as having commanded it to come into existence, is proof that the garden preceded the creation of the universe. So it came before the creation of the universe. In fact, this planting had already been alluded to in the very first word of the Torah, Barashit. The very first word in the Torah. So some people will translate this as like in the beginning. Keep in mind that this garden dated back to an era preceding that described in the Torah in chapter 1. Wow. So it came before that. It dated back to an era preceding that described in the Torah in the very first chapter. The words, "He placed there the human being whom he had fashioned," must have a different connotation. And then it goes on to describe the source of man, his soul. And then we have already explained that man's soul originated in the emanation of Chokmah from the tree. We can now appreciate that the refined souls originate in the east, which is what Kadam means. This is the meaning of the statement which we find in the Sefer HaBahir by Rabbi Nechonia ben Hakana, who wrote one of those Kabbalistic prayers, Ana B'Koach, that the seed of Israel, i.e. its descendants, originated in the eastern parts of the universe, because the marrow in the spinal cord comes directly from the brain, from which it is transmitted to the male organ and converted into semen or seed. So we keep coming up with this over and over again, the spinal cord and the male member and seed, and how it's all connected to the brain. So this is something for the younger men out there to keep in mind. What is the source of this? Anyway, something for you to meditate on. We find proof of this in Isaiah 43:5. "For from the east will I bring your seed, or your descendants, and from the west I will gather you in." The prophet tells us that when Israel will be good, will perform God's commandments, their souls will once again originate in that eastern region. If, however, they fail to live up to God's expectations, and their seed, or the seed of the souls of their children, will be gathered up from the western part of the universe. Very interesting stuff. And how this all goes back to the brain. And it goes on to talk more about space and all these different secrets. Let's continue here. From that region, the souls travel to the foundation of the universe, a region known as Brit, or covenant. So again, for the people, for the young men or the single men who are hearing this, protect the Brit, because it's coming from your brain. So you're losing a bit of yourself. This is why the author of the Sefer HaBahir wrote that the seed comes to the Israelites by means of the spinal cord, which gets its input from the brain traveling down. Very, very interesting indeed. Let's see if there's anything else on the brain. Here we have it. And then it's going on to talk about the West. Just as the seed travels from the brain through the spinal cord to the male member, so the soul wends its way from the region known as Teshuvah via the central line, which is the eastern part of the universe, and it arrives by way of the west. Very interesting. So the soul wends its way from the region known as Teshuvah. This is also something for all of us to meditate on, and how all of these things connect to each other.